All the second stage tanks now pressurized. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with bite.
Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 371, UN Women, coming for your platforms. And they are. I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with Nonsense Annihilator Lauren Brooks and the personification of perceptivity, Mike Stevenson, with the Doge in charge in the background, making sure things work the way they should. And tonight we're still looking into UN Women's behaviors. I can't just say it's complaints against us, because there's shit they wanted to do. And they brought it up a couple of years ago. And some of it sounds suspiciously like the stuff that's being done today using children instead of misogyny as the excuse. So this is something that they've been pushing for a while. And they just basically found which buttons they could push to try to get people to shut up about it and accept it. And it looks like using, exploiting children as the vehicle hasn't necessarily worked any better. People are still talking about it. But in any case, they're still doing it. So we are going to take a look at what they wanted to do. And there's at least one thing here that I didn't know existed. So we'll get into it here in just a minute. But before we get into it, we got to do what we got to do. As always, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions, and as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They've made it clear that for people like us relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice, or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly, instead of relying on any social media platforms tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justtip. We will be reading some of those today from this weekend because we were not able to see them during the show. So we'll do that before we get into today's show as well. As always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, especially with considering what we're reading today, which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. And so, to look at our super chows that we got during this weekend, Zapier gave us $1,000 and a "you what, mate?" Which which doesn't sound as cool coming from Ohio as it does coming from London. But Konos.
What kind of dollars is that?
Yeah.
It doesn't say, so it's probably 1,000 American dollars.
Good Lord.
Holy
Yeah,
shit.
Zapier loves us. So I just wanted to say.
Too. You're invited to the cookout.
There we go. Now we have to have a cookout, guys.
Yes.
You realize that if we invite people, we have to have one.
Yes.
So
I'll be on the grill.
There we go.
I got that.
That's got to happen now, like sometime next summer.
Yeah.
But thank you very much, Zapier. We are very grateful, and we love you too. Konoko's evil twin gave us $50 and said, the assassination of Charlie Kirk is 100% in line with the Femocrat policy to destroy the nuclear family. Divorce is the usual method of eliminating fathers from families, but on this occasion, a bullet was used instead. Charlie just wanted to build bridges. The takeaway lesson from his murder is that not only can you not build bridges with evil psychopaths, you cannot build civilization itself either. There's no middle ground for compromise with evil that will see you dead merely just because of the words you say. The ice floe beckons for the hazardous hominid biowaste that we must discard. And my thinking on this is, this man was assassinated for the crime of reaching out to young men and instilling in them the ability to form convictions with strength and wisdom that they can be confident in by using logic and reason and facts instead of feelings, which is what the universities are pushing on them. He made them less easy to manipulate, lie to, and trick into voting for things that that are against their self-interest. And he made them more capable of forming strong families by choosing a partner who has those same qualities, and forming a family with that partner, and not some flippant female who might have very few trustworthy qualities. And I think that was really the reason there was a big target on his back. He was taking the ability away from the establishment to manipulate young men.
Yeah.
They didn't just want to take him away from his family. They wanted to take him away from their families.
Well, hold on, Hannah. You need to turn down the temperature. I don't see anyone on your side even trying to turn down the temperature on this divisive rhetoric that you're saying. And if you don't turn down the temperature, then we will keep firing guns at you. And don't worry about the temperature of these guns. They're perfectly cold-blooded, and we will keep them as cold-blooded as we can until you shut the fuck up. And I'm doing the bird hands while I say this. You need to shut the fuck up and turn down the temperature on the things you're saying, or else we will keep murdering you. Does that please and sparkle? Is that okay?
I swear I need to make a bird hands video where instead of like the pointy fingers with the bird beak, I'm gonna do the intertwined thumbs with the rest of the fingers sticking out for wings, and just like maneuver them back and forth across in front of my face as I'm talking. Listen to me, I have bird hands. These are bird hands, right? But when it comes down to it, these people talking about turning down the temperature, bringing down the temperature, there's something that they don't realize, right? Too hot and too cold can both lead to the same outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that, when my temper gets to the level where it's threatening to be out of control, there's a thing you do with your temper in that situation, if you're smart and you understand that you're not going to bring down your internal temperature. You are going to be that angry, and it isn't going to go away. It's not something you can squish into a little compartment and say it's not there, and it's not something you can diffuse, because your anger is legitimate. It's real and solid, and the reason for it is valid. It's a valid reason to be angry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody was wrongly murdered here, and it was done for very petty reasons that pretty much are an attack on the entire public. And it's not just an attack on free speech. It's an attack on a way of life, and it's an attack on the country. And what people don't understand is the temperature on that temper can be flipped from hot-blooded, where you would do something maybe poorly thought out, right, to cold and calculated.
Meticulous. Yeah, absolutely.
Meticulous.
Yeah. And
when I get like that, anybody that's on the other side of it should run.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly where we are right now. There are people who don't understand, or they're, criticizing the right, for lack of a better term, for having this reaction. However, it's like, how many times can you poke the bear before the bear actually strikes out and hits you. You know what I mean? It's the same fucking thing. They when it was the left doing it, it was cancel culture, right? Because they were taking our words, twisting them, and then using that to attack our jobs, attack our livelihoods, attack our families. And they don't so much like it when that pendulum swings right the fuck back in their direction. They don't like that shit at all. Well, too
Nope.
bad. Too bad. You open this fucking Pandora's box and you are getting everything that is coming to you in spades. And I you know, I, it's just so frustrating, like, you know, because this is kind of how I am. You know, I'm the nicest person in the world until you fuck with me. Once you do that, then it's all bets are over. You know what I mean? It's that's it. You want this, you wanted this attention, and now you're gonna fucking get it. Now you all are gonna fucking get it. Oh my God, I lost my no. That man lost his fucking life. That woman lost her husband. Those children lost their fucking father. And I don't care about your stupid woe is me cries. Oh, I can't earn a pay. Yes, no, there are not very many companies who will accept a representative of that company, which as an employee, that's exactly what you are. They're not going to take kindly to you being so very publicly dancing on someone's grave.
Yep. Y'all remember
Look,
Donglegate?
Donglegate.
Donglegate. This was at, I believe, PyCon, which is, for anybody that's not a total nerd, that is a convention.
Someone made a joke about a dongle, and
Yes.
some Karen got them fired, right?
Yeah. So PyCon is a convention for people who specialize in using Python, which is a programming language. And I don't know if it's still, I know programming languages sometimes become outdated as new ones come along. And so I don't know if it's still in action. But this was a rather large gathering, and there was a demonstration going on. And there were a couple of guys in the audience. And the joke was so mild. The one said the guy had a big dongle. And a dongle is anything that you attach to your computer. So your USB thumb drive, that's a dongle. If you have a device to to enhance the use of your computer, if you have a second any excess power that you're going to add to it or anything, if you're attaching it, it's a dongle. And that's all he said. That's a big dongle. And the other guy kind of giggled, and then one of them said something about, I'd like to fork his code. And that was the entire conversation. Forking is like you if I remember right, it's you take the individual's existing code and you build from it in a different direction than they were going with it.
This wasn't something said on a
it's still used as last time he checked. So there's probably still, PyCon is probably still in existence.
Yeah, and this
if I
wasn't
remember right, it's an open source language.
It's not like this was something said on a public panel in this convention. It was said in the audience, like in a private conversation between two guys, and some eavesdropping feminist heard this, and she got them cancelled, and she got them fired. This is where the leftist feminists were 10 years ago. They were getting people cancelled for telling that kind of silly joke in private in an audience. I skip to 10 years ahead, and they're getting cancelled for literally advocating murder. And everyone's going, all we did was advocate for murder. The mind boggles. There's not enough space in the mind for all this boggle. So yeah.
Yeah. Mangaka92 on Rumble says Python is one of the most popular currently used. So if I remember right, not too long ago at OSCON, which is open source convention, there was a similar, not quite the same, but a similar kicking out of people who were the wrong political perspective, right, on the wrong side of history, in terms of what political perspectives. You couldn't be there and be conservative, or you couldn't be there and be affiliated with the pro-consumer side of Gamergate, the Gamergate controversy. So basically, Oscon said, "Go home, gamer girl," and of course, the one that hits closest to home for us was Allison and Troop, including at least two of us on this panel were kicked out of a convention for suggesting that both sexes are equally important. Men are as human as women. And if you're going to talk about gender in terms of comics, it's only right and fair to bring both sexes into that conversation. And that was it. That was the controversial statement. Terribly controversial. That was considered harassment to get permission to speak and then to say that. Right? That was it. So in that time period, they were canceling people, destroying careers, right? Getting people fired from their jobs. I mean, there were several of us at A Voice for Men who were doxxed and harassed on Twitter for the crime of switching from calling ourselves men's rights activists, which was actually started as a feminist slur, to calling ourselves men's human rights activists, to remind people that what we are fighting for is simply an inclusion of men in the human rights dialogue. That was it. That was the controversial thing. That was the reason why, for instance, the kindergarten that was attended by Jack Barnes's daughter needed to be published. The address needed to be published so that he should be scared that somebody would show up there and do something violent. Why they needed to tell people where my parents lived. My elderly parents. That was the way that they were just a few years ago. Today they're mad that they cannot repeatedly post pictures of gore and celebrate the murder of a human being for being on the wrong side of a debate about what is the right way to handle certain circumstances, whether it's gay rights, trans rights, how your education is progressing, or any other political issue. The controversy was the existence of open debate. That's it. And they're mad that they can't celebrate that this man was murdered for promoting open debate, and still have their company want to be associated with them. That's who we're up against. That's who's telling us to turn down the temperature. We're allowed to be mad, but you're not, is what we're being told. We're allowed to be violent, but you're not. That's what we're being told. Meredith G gave us $10 and said, there is a question out there because the rise of political violence in the 20th and 21st century seems to correlate to the destruction of men's roles in society and the failure of them to have a place in society. These lost men are easy target for radicalization, and they become weapons for the proxy violence that women fulminate. So I've sort of looked into the history of the gay rights movement in the past. And that includes like the trans rights movement and everything. And something that I found interesting, and we did a show on this a while back. All these rights, the right to be left alone, essentially, to not be treated like a disease in society because you're a little bit different on your own, alone in your home, or with the consenting adult in your home, that was fought for on the backs of men. That was men and biologically male individuals that may identify as female, or men who cross-dressed and still identified as male. They were the ones that did the bulk of activism, of taking the brunt of government punishment, taking the brunt of social punishment, and physically being harmed by people throwing rocks at them, by being shot by rubber bullets, by being shot with real bullets, by being arrested and beaten up, and incarcerated, and in some parts of history by being executed for the crime of being that different, being so different that they have nothing in their lives that is done in service to women. They're the ones that fought for it, right? But the ones that have played victim the loudest are those who are biologically female: lesbians, bisexual women, and trans men. And it's just a historical fact that women co-opt men's places and men's issues. Throughout history, women have done that. Once lesbians took over, when it switched from the gay rights movement to the gay and lesbian movement, and then the LGB movement, and then LGBT, it went from being about human rights, the right to be left alone, the right to not be interfered with as long as you're not interfering with someone else, to all kinds of rights to interfere with other people with impunity, basically, without being told no. The right to erase other people's boundaries. And from there, you ended up in the education system and in the position to brainwash youth, and in the position to brainwash young people like the individual who shot Charlie Kirk. A feminist intrusion into that movement, which was not initially a feminist movement, but intersectional feminism took it over. When intersectional feminism took it over, it became what shaped that young man into an assassin. So feminism is to blame, very much to blame, for the death of Charlie Kirk. Then we have OKFS87_7 gave us $80. Well, thank you for that. Brex gave us $80 and said, I buy Mike a shirt! ! Well, thank you very much, Brex.
Love you, Brex. Brex does so much for us, and he asks for nothing in return. Brex is a hero. He should be protected at all costs.
And Telmnar gave us $30 and said, thanks for the bookmarks, Allison. And then gave us another $40 and thanks for the shirt, too. OKFS87_7 gave us another $50. We didn't get messages from OKFS, so I don't know if that was on purpose or an accident. And then today, Meredith G gave us $5 and said, HBR Talk 371, honey for the badger. Thanks for the thought-provoking conversation. So we are all caught up on our super chows. I also have a story that I just think is important to get out there because it is something that initially I was very annoyed when it was happening, and then but I didn't complain because I figured there might be a reason behind it. And ultimately, the reason was men were protecting me and everybody else on the jet that I flew home on. So I had a 22-hour layover.
Whoa.
In Chicago, which if you're gonna have a 22-hour layover in an airport, that's a good one because they have everything, right? The only thing that's not in the airport is hotels, which if you're gonna pay to stay in a hotel, take a direct flight. The expense is about the same. But so I got up to the airport in Calgary at like 3 a.m. I went in there and waited for American Airlines to open their, I registered my flight, waited for American Airlines to open their system up. And then I got everything taken care of and, got into place and, got on my flight, get to Chicago. And about 20 hours into my 22-hour layover, my flight starts changing gates. I'm like, that happens. I registered way ahead of time, so it's expected. Sometimes this, like almost every time when I've had a cheap flight, there's been a gate change at some point. So no big deal. So I go to the second gate. About 10 minutes later, it changed again. And then there was a flight delay. And then there was another flight delay and a third flight delay. And in between the second and the third flight delay, they bounced me back and forth between 3 different gates for a grand total of 9 gate changes.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like walking back and forth. My legs were already tired because we went up on the mountain at Banff, and I'm abysmally out of shape, like to the degree of like embarrassingly out of shape. People were watching out for me because they thought I was gonna die. But
she did make it to the top, ladies and gentlemen.
I did make it to the top.
We all made it to the top eventually. It's a glorious view. It's worth it.
It is. But apparently, I've been told I was white as a sheet. But I don't make false teeth for people who know the song. But in any case, I was obviously annoyed walking back and forth with sore legs and everything. But I thought, there's got to be a reason for this. They don't just do this. I've never seen them do this before. So finally, it gets to where they're not changing the gate anymore. They're not delaying the flight anymore. And I was able to talk to somebody about what's going on with this flight. Like, is something wrong? Is everything okay? And it turns out that the jet we were originally going to be on had a problem, and there was no way that problem could be fixed in time for them to use that jet to make that flight. So they switched it to another jet. And that jet also had a problem, but they could fix that one. That problem was doable. They could handle it before, flight time. Well, then the engineers decided that, no, the mechanics that were working on the plane, this is going to take longer than you told the passengers. And so they changed the gate the first time to give them a little more time, but didn't delay the flight. And then when they did delay the flight, they delayed it like at the last minute. And then the mechanics are like, no, it's going to take this much time. Even if you don't give us this much time, we're not going to compromise. And so they took the amount of time it needed to do the job right, to make sure the jet was in operating condition so that we wouldn't crash on the way back to Dayton. So shout out to the flight mechanics at American Airlines who protected everybody on that plane from the bureaucracy, because when they obviously had to fight for their right to do their job correctly. And this is why you should be glad that a lot of mechanical engineers and other mechanics are a little bit autistic. Right? And they'll put their foot down and say, this is going to take an hour, whether you want it to take half an hour or an hour. So they just go ahead and tell them it's going to take an hour. I'm glad for that. Right. And I know bureaucrats don't always understand. So
it's not the most efficient way to travel, but this is why they call it the safest way to travel. At least it was until it got flooded with DEI, but that's another story for another day. We haven't been affected with all that bullshit yet. But
you're still more likely to encounter the type of accident that will cause you to die if you're in a car than you are if you're on a jet. Because being on a jet, accidents are much less forgiving. They work much harder to prevent them. because there's a whole lot of accidents you can have in a car that are just very annoying and don't result in injury or death. Just some that are potentially fatal. And people are more careless with vehicles, I think, because they feel safe being surrounded by this cage and all of the safety features that have been added and so on. Where when you're thousands of feet in the air, you know that there's not very many things that can go catastrophically wrong without killing you. Or at least that's the way it feels, right? And so you're a lot more careful. So there you go. Men doing their jobs, women most affected, but in a good way. But that all said, let's get into the meat of
We
the
have to talk about UN Women now. Oh,
we do.
I wish we could just delay the inevitable by talking about anything else. But,
Brief
all right,
recap.
fine.
All right. So let's see. We have to go here. This is where we were, right? We had this discussion about this article. What is the manosphere and why should we care? Blah, blah, blah. We read this and it ended in a discussion about digital abuse and real world stereotypes and misogyny and so on. And we got to the risk of radicalization. We read the rest of this, right? But we got to the risk of radicalization. And we're told about this research from the Institute for Strategic Dialogue. So we looked up the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, and this is them powering solutions to hate, extremism, and authoritarianism.
Oh my!
I don't want your fucking cookies. Rejected. There we go. And of course we looked at who they are and what they do. Let's see, that wasn't here, but it gave a brief explanation of who they are, and then most of the pages for what they do and how that manifests didn't lead anywhere. There were no links. So then we found the actual study and opened it up, and we read their definitions last week. How they define, or not last week, but last episode, how they define things like misogyny and online gender-based violence, which I still can't take seriously, right? Online violence. I had a conversation with a feminist during my my wait time for my first leg of my first flight, or the flight to Calgary. And in that conversation, it might have been during the layover, but in that conversation, she repeatedly inserted video and images of gore from the Charlie Kirk murder, from the Charlie Kirk assassination, into the conversation that were completely unrelated to what was under discussion. These were not, we weren't discussing Charlie Kirk. We were discussing something else. And she just invaded the conversation from outside. She wasn't tagged into it. She didn't need to be there. She kind of invited herself in and started posting that shit. Two strangers on the internet with no connection whatsoever to the conversation. Right? If we did that to feminists who were discussing something to do with maybe custody or child support or something like that, and just started, I don't know if there's any such gore related to them, honestly, but just started, took a woman who had been murdered, that there were images of this woman being murdered, and just started posting that gore in that chat. You can guarantee 100%, without a doubt, that would be deemed online gender-based violence, because ironically, it was targeting women.
We have examples very recently of a woman being brutally murdered and a man being brutally murdered. They've been the two biggest stories in the news over the last week or so. And I guess showing either of them would be unacceptable anti-feminist nonsense. We're talking about Irina Zarutska and Charlie Kirk. And you'd think that they would present as opposing examples of violence against women and violence against men. And yet they're both being presented by the quote-unquote right. And until Charlie Kirk was murdered, I was like, the murder of Irina Zarutska is an example of the right sort of taking up the mantle that the left refused to take up. Because you would expect that, hang on, I have a write-up somewhere that I didn't get to do in the other thing. Where is it? Yeah. I'm going to be a little bit controversial here, but I feel that you need to notice how the quote-unquote online right is so ready to adopt the ostensible positions of the legacy left, as and when the legacy left neglects to adopt them. As we know, the virtue signalers of the oikophobic, misandric left are usually very vocal about protecting women. And in the current decade, they're also very vocal about protecting Ukrainians. But it shouldn't be surprising that they're all radio silent when it comes to the brutal, senseless murder of a Ukrainian woman, as and when they can't find a way to blame it on native men, i.e. white men, in this case, American men. We've all been here doing this for long enough to understand perfectly why they don't give a shit, because they never did give a shit about protecting women or Ukrainians. They're only interested in demonizing European men, especially European American men. What seems odd to me is that the quote-unquote online right is so ready to pick up the slack of the legacy left. They're supposed to be the ones who give a shit about men, especially their own countrymen. But they don't seem to give a shit about the countless examples of their own countrymen getting publicly shanked and shot and sucker punched on a daily basis in every major city in every Western country. And they have the nerve to make the story about how the legacy media isn't covering this whatsoever. Yeah, and you never covered the stories of the exact same shit happening to men all the time, unless it's a celebrity like Charlie Kirk, and then you give a shit. And yes, I realize it's not news when it happens to men, because it happens all the time to men. It's like people taking illegal drugs or exceeding the speed limit. These are crimes that are committed all over the place, all over the time. If we made a news story about it every time it happens, it would make up 99% of the news. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be outraged about innocent men getting killed or injured. Pardon my anus, but I think men's lives are just as important as women's lives, and we ought to be, if anything, 100 times more outraged about their lives being callously disposed of, what with it happening 100 times more often, approximately. And the fact that we're not is, to me, the story. If you think the fate of Irina Zarutska is symbolic of the decline of society because half of the country doesn't seem to give a shit, well, I have some shocking news for you. This shit happens to men all the time, and almost the entire country doesn't give a shit. And it's been this way for longer than anyone can remember. The left doesn't care about anyone or anything. We've established that. What the left claims to care about is actually what the right cares about. Women, especially photogenic women, especially Ukrainian refugees. Meanwhile, what the right claims to care about is actually what nobody cares about. Men. It's what nobody cares about. except, of course, us, a handful of shadow banned space lepers on the internet. Now that the psychotic left is finally acknowledging this, a lot of them are going, well, this is what you white people can expect after 400 years of oppressing black people. And the right is responding to this by going, but she's Ukrainian! As if to insinuate that if she was American or Western European, it would somehow be a valid point for these psychos to be blaming the victim. Or at least it would be a more valid point. Sorry, but fuck you. Actually, sorry, not sorry, and fuck you. Nobody deserves to be shanked in the neck. Not even people of Northwest European descent, not even men. But yeah, we've got the left continuing to blame everything on Northwest European men, while the right is defending everyone else. It's been completely normalized for this to happen to us. For every 99 men who get brutalized, it happens to one woman, and then everyone gets outraged. And they think they're addressing the problem. You're not. This is a symptom of the problem. The complete indifference to white male lives and their disposability is the problem. You only demonstrate your compliance with this problem when you ignore all the male lives and you clutch at your pearls on the odd occasion when that callous indifference happens to affect a female life. If you want to address this problem, try addressing the other 99% of it. If you want to preserve life, see if you can briefly glance in the direction of the vast majority of lives that are being unthinkingly disposed of, dare I say, systematically and institutionally, namely your own countrymen. The left needs to stop demonizing them at every opportunity, and the right needs to at least acknowledge them. That would at least be a start. We still haven't even got to the start. Don't pretend like you give a shit about innocent lives when you can't even comprehend that men have innocent lives.
Yeah.
Sick of it, man. Fucking sick of it.
Very much so. And as a result, like there's a lot of men who are simply choosing to walk away. And they're right to do so. I mean, when you consider it, right? Engaging in violence on someone else's behalf, even if it is the mildest form of violence, you bear hug somebody, for instance, to keep them from doing something more violent. That's risky. There's a physical risk involved. That individual may switch their violence effectively to you. If they're ineffective, okay, may seem like no big deal. If they're effective, then you're injured. Right? So every time someone expects a man to step up on behalf of the victim of a violent crime, they're saying, you need to put yourself at risk to protect this other individual. You need to make this other individual's safety more important than your own. Right? That is the message that men are getting. They're getting that message every day. They get that message every day from early childhood when they are told to get in between bullies and girls, even if the bully is another girl. And the best advice you could give a guy is if the bully is another girl, you stay out of it. If you see two women fighting, two girls fighting, stay out of it. It's going to get vicious. There's nothing, literally nothing you can do to help that isn't going to result in some sort of splashback on you of some sort of consequence, whether it's physical or social or legal. But
and even when they hear that, like, you can literally say the words to these men, and it's just like natural instinct for them to just be on this. Well, no, I must protect the
they're so
women.
brainwashed
Yeah,
into it.
yeah.
Like I said, from early childhood,
Mhm.
that other people's safety is more important than their own, and that
Yeah.
it's their job to risk their safety for other people. It's
Yeah.
not.
It's
You're not
not.
getting paid for that.
Nope.
That's a job. Security staff does that job. Bodyguards do that job. They get paid. police do that job, they get paid.
Right. And it's
Right?
not
You're
even
not
that
getting paid.
it's not even that it's not your job. It's not your responsibility. And on top of which, you could end up risking your own life or jail time
Yep.
because you wanted to help this woman because she said she was in danger. Oh my
And
God,
you
this
could be in
guy
the
did.
wrong.
Yeah.
Like the incidents, there's been a few incidents that have been made public online where some woman stole a man's bag, shopping bag or whatever. Like, those grocery shopping bags you can buy to reuse,
Yeah.
and tried to run off with it. And everybody thought because he was chasing her that he was the purse snatcher and tackled him. And there's been a couple instances where the actual bag snatcher got away.
Mm.
There's been instances where, the individual that was the victim of the bag snatching got injured by the people trying to protect the bag snatcher from him. And, people have been sued for this. People have been jailed for assaulting someone because of this. So yeah, if you don't understand the situation, you could actually do something wrong by trying to protect a woman. Women do commit crimes. And women do commit violent crimes.
Hmm.
They may not be the majority arrested for violent crimes, but when you see a violent conflict between a man and a woman, you don't know what's going on. And the best thing to do is either stay out of it or to try to talk it down to, let's wait for the police and let them decide what's going on instead of you deciding what's going on and engaging in violence. And the other thing that I would say is, in those circumstances, even if you take pictures or video for evidence purposes, don't put that shit on social media.
No.
All right? Because whoever the victim is probably doesn't want to be on social media being the victim of a crime. That is a moment of embarrassment and humiliation for a violent crime victim. It's horrible being dominated by another person and not being able to stop them from doing to you whatever it is they want to do to you or taking from you whatever it is they want to take from you. It's not just humbling, it's humiliating.
Mhm.
And nobody wants their most humiliating moment on social media for everybody to see that they couldn't defend themselves. So yeah, this is it's not, you don't become a hero by putting that stuff on social media. You don't become a hero by jumping to conclusions about a circumstance and then acting on those without evidence. So in any case, yeah, that's real world violence, and that violence is real, right? This is an entirely different story. So where we are now, we're talking about what they want to do. What do they want to do about the situation? And the first thing they came out with, their introductory paragraph to this section, which I guess they didn't put the label for each section. They just they just put the section up. Let me see if I have this again. We'll just duplicate this tab. We are on, this will be page 21. But let's see if I can go. No, I don't need that. Go all the way back to the top. We don't need to view a summary. We need to view the title. The thing that I'm looking at is we talked about how they want to enable API access to platform data. So they want Facebook and X.com and Reddit and YouTube and all those different platforms to share with each other. Here is what the people on our platform are saying and doing, and here's what we are doing, what our algorithms look like, what our information coming in looks like, and so on. Right. And then we talked a little bit about how they want to, when they say apply a victim survivor-centered safety and privacy by design, like by design approach, what they're saying is you're guilty until proven innocent, and then sometimes even if proven innocent, in terms of what you have said and done on social media and its impact on the individual who is reporting you, and whether or not that impact makes you guilty of something, that doing something wrong, whether there's wrongdoing involved. You're guilty unless proven innocent, and sometimes even if. Right? How they feel determines your guilt. So even if you say something or do something that is completely innocent, if someone feels harassed by it, you can still be considered guilty by that reason. And I think we've also talked in the past about how some of those platforms, back when X was Twitter, for instance, would take the exact same behavior, and it would be against terms of service if people with the wrong political outlook did it. But if people with accepted political outlooks did it, then it was okay. So feminists could call me a bitch and a cunt, and call me a gay man as a form of insult, use slurs, anti-gay slurs, all kinds of stuff in conversation, and get away with it. But if I said it was idiotic for somebody to think that somebody with the name Hannah was male, that would get reported, and I would get a 12-hour suspension for insulting the individual, or for hate. You know, they could say, "Well, you're calling them stupid," right? So that would be basically that unequal. But if you reported the stuff they said, they would, no wrongdoing would be found. And to a degree, trust and safety is still doing that, right? Case in point, the word retarded. Depending on which side of the political aisle you're on, you can use that word over and over again, and no wrongdoing is found. But if you use that word once on the wrong side of the political aisle, it's a suspension. So there you go.
And it should always be acceptable, because retarded just means slow. It was simply used as a euphemism after all the other euphemisms worked. The word imbecile used to be the scientifically appropriate word, and then that was overused by people calling their mates imbecile whenever they did something imbecilic, and then it got changed to moron. Moron used to be the equivalent of the word retard. It was what it used to be, a scientifically applicable word, but then people got hold of that and started using it to call their friends whenever they did something retarded, and then they had to change it to retarded. It's been called the euphemism treadmill.
Yeah.
No matter what word you use, it keeps getting overused, and then we had to use a different word, and then we had to use a different word, and no matter what word we use, it goes from politically correct to politically incorrect, and it doesn't matter what word you change it to, it keeps getting added to this fucking treadmill, and it's the same problem all swear words have. The fact that people are offended by them is why people keep using them.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's because it's offensive that we make jokes about it.
Yeah.
And it covers so many of these things. People make jokes about women because we know it's naughty, because we know we're not supposed to do that.
Well, and what you get when people go too far in the other direction is kind of hilarious. Like, I used to have a boss that went to Catholic school when she was growing up, And she was that kid who always got pulled to the front of the class. You're going to sit up here by the teacher's desk because you're misbehaving, right? Pretty sure she had ADD. She was very, very hyperactive, even as an adult. And like she couldn't sit still for a minute. But she wouldn't, if she didn't like something, a lot of people would say, "Oh, that's retarded." She wouldn't say that. She would say, "That's redundant." And I used to razz her about it. Like somebody would do something and she'd be like, "Oh, don't do that. That's redundant." And I would say, "No, they only did it once." And she'd be like, "Shut up. Shut up."
That word doesn't mean what you think it means.
Yeah. Well, I mean, she knows what it means. She just couldn't say retarded because it was programmed out of her in school. They probably rapped her on the knuckles with a stick repeatedly, a yardstick repeatedly for saying stuff like that. So, you have this, she had another word she used for it. Everybody knew she meant retarded. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the other end of it. In the industry, because I'm a direct support professional right now. I've been a direct support professional for 11 years. We work with intellectually disabled adults. We do not work with retarded people. We don't call them that because not everybody who has an intellectual disability is retarded. I have an IQ on paper, at least. And this has a range. All right. The lowest score I've ever gotten on an informal test has been 145. The official score I was given in a medical setting was 165. At one point, when we thought I had a physical disability caused by a car accident, and I started the process of going for disability very grudgingly, their first rejection, they sent me to a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist said that my IQ was off his chart. He didn't have a number for it, which his numbers went at least up to 200. And so different days I might have different results, but I'm sticking with 165 because that's what my doctor found. Right? I have an intellectual disability. I am autistic. If I see something happen, like a crime, and I want to tell the police what happened, and they want to take me in and have me sit with an artist to draw a picture of the face of the person who did it, I can't do that. Right? I won't be able to tell them what shape the eyes were, or whether the nose is wide enough or not, whether they were smiling or frowning, whether they, like, I can tell you if they sounded angry, I can tell you if their words were angry, but unless their facial expression was exaggerated, I won't remember it. If you tell me your name, 5 minutes later, I won't remember that either. And I'll struggle for it for weeks. Right? If you give me a puzzle to work on, and then the building catches on fire, you better drag my ass out of there because I'm not going to notice. But even though I might not notice that fire alarm going off, if there's a beep in the background from something else, it will drive me fucking nuts.
Like a smoke alarm?
Oh, God. I hate smoke alarms. I absolutely, and they go off. So at my work, in some of the houses, like they're owned by an organization. So there's instead of an individual like us being able to just go in and change the batteries, you have to report it to maintenance that the battery has died and the fire alarm or the smoke alarm is going off. And of course, that's not an emergency. They will come in during the day. So if it starts going off at 10 o'clock at night and I come in at 11:30, it's going to continue to do that every so many seconds throughout the entire night while I'm there. And there's not a single room you can go into where you can't hear it. So, like, I can handle that. I don't like it. I really don't like it. So I'm not as bad off as some people. This kind of thing can really interfere with an individual sometimes, but it will help prevent me from being as effective in any kind of like problem solving, because every time I hear that, I lose track of my thoughts. Right. So intellectual disability covers a much broader spectrum of things that happen to people. If you have attention deficit disorder, you are on the intellectual disability spectrum. If you legitimately have it, if your teacher didn't just decide that an 8-year-old acting like a normal 8-year-old had ADD, because ADD is a lot more rare than it looks because it's over-diagnosed. Autism is a lot more rare than it looks because it's overdiagnosed. And then of course autism also has a spectrum. And then there are other brain disorders that get diagnosed as autism when they're not. So that's another problem, right? But to simplify the entire thing, the entire spectrum to retarded is retarded.
Yeah.
Only idiots do that. Only morons call everybody on the intellectual disabilities spectrum retarded. Nobody with any real intelligence would do that. Because they have to know that they are lumping people in who probably have a higher IQ than they do, and probably could outperform them in certain areas of life. And they're lumping them in with people who have such a low IQ that they wouldn't be able to handle a hypothetical question. So there you go. But
we're now at the point where the appropriate word for such people is slow. Oh my God, you're being so slow. And we're going to get to the point where it's politically incorrect to call someone slow. You can't call someone slow. I have a cousin who is medically slow. How dare you make fun of a medical condition like being slow? And then we'll need to call it something else. Yeah. I don't even know what that's going to be.
Meanwhile, while the industry has moved on to referring to intellectual disabilities, the state is still using mentally retarded / developmentally delayed, as if you always catch up later. So it's kind of, and they may never change that, right? It's just like euphemisms for being black went through a whole variety of different. You can't call people this, you can't call people that. At one point, you can't use the word colored to describe somebody who is black. And the NAACP, the C in CP is colored people, right? That never changed. And I think it's because a lot of times these organizations are fully aware that those euphemisms are going to change. And it's too much trouble to try to keep up. And I think the public should take that same attitude. It's too much trouble to try to keep up. My opinion is the word stupid only describes people who could do better, but choose not to. And so if I call you stupid, I'm insulting your behavior, not your intelligence. I'm suggesting that you are smarter than you are acting. And I think that that's shameful. There's no shame in having a handicap. You can't choose that, and you can't do anything about that. And, you can only try to mitigate its effects. But if you act handicapped when you're not, that should be embarrassing. But so where we are now in this, we are looking at, I believe, let's see. Yeah. This is review and update content moderation policies, processes, and systems, and audit and mitigate misogyny in AI-based systems. So the first thing I thought of is, are they worried about Grok being misogynist, or what? And the first thing that they've said here, they've introduced, is this first paragraph, which is very vague and didn't make any sense. The first sentence didn't make any sense to me until I looked it up. Right? Legislative frameworks, they say, have identified the need for user agency and empowerment and started requiring platforms to be more accountable and transparent about their design and policies. So what the heck is a legislative framework? I understand, for instance, legislators. Legislative bodies would be, say, Congress in the United States, Parliament in other parliamentary systems, and in, of course, in dictatorships, it's all the same. Like, if the king runs everything, the king is the legislative body and the executive. But what the fuck is a legislative framework? Because when I think of a framework, I think of a set of rules, a set of conditions that determine a particular factor or issue. So I did a Google search here, and of course Google's AI overview gave me a definition which looks interesting, and it came from sites that seem to be, well, we'll ignore YouTube, Natural Resource Governance Institute, and this EOXS here, which if we look, this is this came up easier before, but we'll give that a minute, right? A legislative framework is a comprehensive system of laws, regulation, and legal principles that governs a specific area or issue within a country, state, or organization. So it's not the legislative body, it's the body and the existing laws, the existing regulations, and the principles on which they are acting. And the importance of that is, in the United States and in several other first world nations, there is this legal principle upon which a huge amount is determined, called feminist jurisprudence. And let's see. Feminist jurisprudence, which, by the way, it's not just countries like the United States and the UK, countries that have traditionally been thought of as in between first and third world, which many of which are first world with some third world conditions, like India, still have a significant infection of feminist jurisprudence in their legal systems. But feminist jurisprudence, or feminist legal theory, analyzes law from the perspective of women's political, economic, and social experiences. So it is essentially legal or legislative or policy-based gynocentrism. It is putting women first in law, policy, and regulations, and also in the justice system, in jurisprudence. So if you walk into a court, you get an advantage just by being female, starting out. That would be feminist jurisprudence, and that is a. Of course, it's not coming up now. I wonder what the heck is going on with that site. So initially, I had looked this up. But it's an intelligence hub. It's essentially a communications hub for a variety of organizations. So this is sort of a consensus website. So this legislative framework that considers like the things that are influenced by legal principles, and then the legal principles themselves governing a specific area or issue. It works as a blueprint. So when they say legislative frameworks have identified, what they are saying is the blueprint we are currently using, which is to say our current gynocentric blueprint. So the interpretation of this, as I'm reading it, is modern feminist jurisprudence-based systems have identified the need for user agency and empowerment, started requiring platforms to be more accountable and transparent in their design and policies. User agency in this context then would mean women's ability to control who can talk to them and how they can be spoken to. That is essentially what this is about. And then the first thing it mentions, Australia's Online Safety Act 2021, which refers to basic online safety expectations, which require platforms to put in place clear and readily identifiable mechanisms that enable users to report and make complaints about content, as well as terms of use, policies, and procedures. So this is essentially what they are saying here is, modern feminist jurisprudence requires that, we impose upon social media, various social media websites, an obligation to give women tools to silence other people if women don't like what those other people are saying. That's essentially what UN Women has asked for. So if you happen to be an anti-feminist, or if you happen to be a men's rights activist, or both, because I'm both, and there's quite a bit of overlap there in motivation, then they want the right to tell you to shut the fuck up. They want the right to get you suspended for your political opinions. So the first thing they mention, harassment manager developed by Google's Jigsaw. So I didn't know I never heard of this Jigsaw thing, right? Harassment manager, it says, is an open source code base for web application that allows users to document and manage abuse targeted at them on social media. Starting with X, who partnered on the project. Now, I haven't heard of this. I've been using X since it was Twitter. In fact, I was using Twitter since 2009, and I never heard of this system. Nobody came to me and said, hey, you can use our harassment manager. Twitter is partnered with it. So apparently, if they're doing this, they're not making it user controlled. And essentially, this is intended to allow users to keep track of abuse targeting them on social media. The tool intends to help users identify and document harmful posts, mute or block perpetrators of harassment, and hide harassing replies to their own tweets. Now, X does some of that, right? You can actually, if you make a post and you're the OP and not posting a comment under someone else's OP, you can select who can reply. But you can't just exclude one person. You can decide that people you follow can reply, nobody can reply, people with a check mark can reply, or everybody can reply. You don't get everybody except for @takesdown_MRAs can reply, right? For instance, or God, I can't think of her name. The one that we used to, every time she replied, we would post a picture of Gladys from Bewitched. But
Ellie Ellison?
no, she was this is this crazy lady on Twitter that for the longest time she was
Oh, she had mice.
she was obsessed with Deborah Pawnee. And every place that, and she was also obsessed with Allison. Every place that either one of them posted, she was in the replies. And eventually we all blocked her, and she started tagging us in her posts. She would tag this whole set of us. I was included in the set, unfortunately. And she'd make these posts, and then people would get into arguments with her, and we would be flooded with replies from these. And so it was nice when X allowed people to just leave the conversation, where you could click leave the conversation and mute the conversation, and you don't get any more replies. Gladys from Bewitched was the neighbor that used to spy on the family to try to prove, that they were witches. So for anybody, that's an old TV show. So for the Gen Xers, they'll know it. Millennials might know from the movie that was made. But Zoomers are gonna have no clue who I'm talking about. If you look up Bewitched, it was just an old TV show from, I think, the 60s. So anyway, and the lead actress on that show, by the way, did an episode of The Twilight Zone with Charles Bronson, where she played a Russian soldier and he played an American soldier or a British soldier or something. And there had been World War III and everything was completely gone, completely destroyed, and they were the only people left in the world. And it was a great episode. So just an aside there.
That was the true origin of the Mary Sue. Just having a female character who can do absolutely anything and yet has no real agency when it comes to the moral of the story.
Yeah. Well, that would be Bewitched, not the Twilight Zone episode, because women on the Twilight Zone did have some agency. And there were some episodes that really showed that. But yeah, so all this stuff, there's stuff you can see that they're doing here that can be traced back to this. But clearly nobody told us about this. The code is available on GitHub, open source for developers and non-governmental organizations to build and adapt for free. So you can actually see this being used on other websites, other social media. And essentially all of the ways that you can report someone. Yes, Mangaka92, that is exactly what Natty is doing in regard to Brian's posts. I'm about to start, every time I see her show up in a conversation I'm in, posting that picture again, because that is basically what's happening. And yes, Samantha from Bewitched, John Doe, is the nose wiggle woman. She would wiggle her nose and it would cast a spell. She didn't have to actually say any words, so people didn't know she was casting spells. But she did face consequences. It's just, it wasn't necessarily always direct. Things would go horribly wrong. It's the same trope. This goes back to vaudeville. The trope is you have a goal or a thing that you want or a problem that you're trying to solve, but everything that you do makes it worse until the end of the show or the episode, when everything gets all wrapped up by some problem-solving thing that undoes all of the damage that you did, or most of it. And that's not new. It's eons ago. It's probably goes back to ancient Greek tragedies, and so on. But it's the main formula used in comedy for sitcoms in the United States. Pretty much, you name a sitcom, that's the formula. And some people have been stellar at it, like Lucille Ball, for instance. That her sitcom was stellar at it. That's So Raven was stellar at it. Friends was stellar at it. Seinfeld, stellar at it. They're just different, and those sitcoms stood out because of that. But very different. Like there's a lot of sitcoms that they don't do the work, and so it doesn't stand out, but they still skate by because that trope is always entertaining, even when it's done poorly. So it's an easy bet, basically. In any case, back to this. What we're seeing here basically is this coordinated attack on the ability of people to argue on social media, to hash out ideas in a thought-provoking and a method that hones ideas down to what are wise choices, good ideas, as opposed to poor choices or bad ideas. There you go, Night Motorcyclist. Married with Children stood out because it was stellar at this as well. And yeah, every man can relate to Al Bundy. Not every woman can relate to the women in the show, though. Some of us relate more to Al Bundy than any of the women in that show. But we all know those women in real life. In any case, so we're seeing a coordinated attack on your ability as a man to defend yourself against, say, a feminist comes out and says all men are bad because 97 or 99%, they give different numbers of violent crime is male perpetrated. And they'll give you conviction statistics or crime reporting statistics from, like, they don't count all the crimes that are reported. They count all the crimes that the police acted on in crime report statistics. So the crimes that the police then made a case file for. And it'll say, well, 99% of those or 97% of those are male perpetrated. Well, the big problem with that is when you do the math on what percentage of the population, the adult male population, is represented by perpetration of violent crimes as determined by those crime reports. So essentially the idea that crime, if we took all those reports as valid and then also supposed that crime is underreported by a certain percent and then added that percent in and said this many violent crimes occurred according to the math that I just described, less than 1% of the population, something like 0.3% of the adult male population, or at least the male population that can be charged as an adult for committing such a crime, is actually accounted for by perpetrators or potential perpetrators of violent crimes. So the other 99.7% is represented by the number of people who have never committed a violent crime. And if you argue that, and a feminist is offended because she was a violent crime victim, she can report you for harassing her. And I know this because I've been in that argument, and I had a feminist using her claim to be a rape victim and have had an experience as a rape victim. Her allegations against the general male public and her allegations against the police that they don't do anything about this problem, that men don't care about this problem, that rape is prevalent and most men are rapists because such a percentage of rape is perpetrated by men and so on. When I pointed out my experiences, in which the police do everything they can for you, but they do need evidence to prove that the crime was committed, right? That was considered harassment. Just saying that I had a different experience with being victimized and how the police and the people around me have responded to it. That was considered harassment of this woman. And I was suspended for 12 hours for saying that's not what happened in my case. And providing statistics that demonstrate that the majority of men are not perpetrators. And that it is unfair to call all men potential rapists when less than 3% of the population, or less than 0.3% of the population, is represented by all violent crime perpetration. That's harassment, right? But if I had spoken first, and which is what actually happened, and then reported her for harassment because she brought up sex crimes. The conversation, by the way, was not about sex crimes. Because I'm on the wrong side of the political fence, that's not harassment. Right? Even though being a survivor myself, I don't really like hearing about sex crimes. Like, I talk about the situation, the subject and everything because it's needed. Right? There's a lot of exploitation of the subject to push through attacks on due process rights and attacks on other civil rights, and that's wrong. But and it has to be talked about, otherwise it'll just happen, and it'll be too late after the fact to undo that stuff. It's a lot harder to undo bad laws than it is to stop them from being passed in the first place. But yeah. So this is their idea of testing a tool for gender-based violence. All these different platforms based on feminist jurisprudence as a legal principle that governs this area and or issue. All these different platforms are obligated to give women the ability to shut you up when they make negative stereotype characterizations of men as a population, because women's feelings might be hurt if you prove them wrong. You guys still there?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm eating while I listen.
Okay. So here's how they plan on doing this. The first thing is, again, enhancing cross-platform cooperation. Platforms, they say, should recognize that what occurs on other platforms may make its way to their own service and vice versa. This is not only true of TVEC, which is technology something. Is it like this is they use TFOGBV to say technology facilitated online gender-based violence. So this is probably technological violence and then some other bullshit. But also of the actors and tactics of online gender-based violence. Online harassment campaigns targeting an individual may be coordinated on one platform with the content or URLs to this content cross-posted to other platforms where the targeted users may or may not have accounts. So an example of what they're talking about, well-known example, this happened years ago and consequences have never been the same. There was this kid, 11 years old, that was a fan of a local, I don't even know what kind of music the guy played, but some people on 4chan decided that this musician was a pedo, and they decided they were going to prove it by demonstrating how many of his fans were underage, which is really kind of stupid because most musicians have underage fans. People start enjoying music when they're very young, and they really get excited about music in like junior high and high school and start wanting to go to concerts and stuff like that. And of course, at those ages, you want to be involved in what your kids are doing. So smart parents do not send their children to any type of concert, musical concert or performance without an adult chaperone, because crazy things happen at concerts. But of course, yeah, this doesn't always pan out for local musicians, and so this young lady, young girl, 11-year-old Jessie Slaughter, was a fan of this local musician, and she would go to all of his concerts that she could go to, and got a picture taken with him and put it on her social media, and 4chan found it and used it to smear the guy, and she responded that there was no such relationship happening, that she was just a fan. That's silly. Cut it out. Pretty tame stuff on the outset. The individuals that were in this conversation decided to start trolling her as a result of this, right? And it escalated when she made a YouTube video calling them out for the trolling and the idiocy, and she acted like an 11-year-old girl. So she made a bunch of empty threats and got graphic with her descriptions of violence and basically stupid shit that kids do at the playground. Like you might tell somebody you're going to rip their head off. She threatened to throw to get a Glock and blow their brains out. I think she used the phrase brain slushy, and that set off, trolls are trolls. That set off the trolls, so they went ballistic and they doxed her. And they went through a process of everything from vandalizing and destroying her social media to sending things to her house, calling her home phone. The family actually had to send her someplace else for a time. Like it really was over the top. And the thing that made it worse was when they started doing this, her father got on her YouTube account and made a video lecturing them with a bunch of empty threats. And some of those became, these are memes that, again, Gen X will know these memes. Millennials will probably know these memes. Zoomers probably never heard of consequences will never be the same, which is one of the things he said. He threatened to send the cyber police after them, which, everybody knows didn't exist. And so on. Like there are a bunch of things that came out of that. And that set them off even more. But the reality is the parents just didn't recognize that you shouldn't let your kid be on the internet unsupervised. Your 11-year-old should not be making unsupervised YouTube videos. And honestly shouldn't be putting his or her face out there on YouTube, because there are not just trolls, there's also predators and so on. And it escalated into something absolutely ridiculous. And I think it impacted her life pretty heavily. Right? That is something that has, happened throughout the history of the internet. As long as there's been a World Wide Web, and as long as there's been discussion forums, that kind of thing has happened. And I guess you could call swatting an outcropping of that. But in any case, so that's a real issue. It's not denying that that's an issue. What I am suggesting is this is not a good way to handle it, right? For one thing, not everybody involved in that harassment campaign was from the U.S. Right? That's there. A site like 4chan has traffic from every English-speaking country in the world, and so it's not like you can call the cops and report to them that someone in Australia is harassing you if you're from some state in the U.S., right? We all know that. And so you don't poke a hornet's nest like that. But if something like that happens, you can hold the people in your own country accountable. The singer in question, which people have said the name in the comments and everything, I'm not going to go that far. But if he was really concerned about his reputation being damaged and stuff like that, all he had to do was go through and identify people from the U.S. who were involved in that and sue them for defamation. If there was really something going on that put him in danger. Otherwise, the best thing to do in a circumstance like that is to ignore it, and it goes away. They're not going to do it if it's not fun. Like, they can say anything they want, and if nothing comes of it, if they don't get any kind of feed back from you, like a narcissistic feed, because most trolls are a little narcissistic, that doesn't work for them, and they quit. They go somewhere else. They look for that feed somewhere else. What do they want instead? Platforms should develop and operate exchange channels between relevant teams, including safety and content moderation teams like Trust and Safety, to proactively share information about cross-platform harassment, such as perpetrators using multiple accounts, including where relevant user reports of multi-platform harassment. So, for instance, during the Gamergate controversy, some websites banned the hashtag and any conversation about the consumer revolt. You couldn't talk about it. You couldn't post information about it. And you couldn't post memes about it. So it was kind of limited to Twitter at the time. You didn't really see, there was a little bit on YouTube. There's a little bit maybe taking place on Facebook. I think 4chan completely banned it, which is funny because that used to be the place to go to discuss things that you couldn't discuss anywhere else. There were other platforms that banned it as well. But under this system that they want to create, all these different social media platforms would circle the wagons because the opposition to the consumer revolt was using the false allegation that the entire result or the entire revolt was just an act of harassment of some programmer's ex-girlfriend to try to silence it, right? That would be able to silence it on all platforms. You wouldn't be able to talk about advertising being disguised as real news stories because that would be part of the harassment campaign against this girl. You wouldn't be able to talk about contests being rigged because that would be part of the harassment campaign against this girl. You wouldn't be able to talk about any kind of pay-for-play journalism, right? Because that was part of the harassment campaign against this girl. Didn't have anything to do with her. Like, she exposed it by accident, but other than that, it didn't really have anything to do with her. But she was more than willing to capitalize on it for attention and to be used as a means of silencing people who are having that discussion.
As they say, free speech ends where my fist meets your nose. But it doesn't end where this bitch's vagina meets my nose. Or something like that.
That would have been a horrible experience.
It was a horrible experience. But that's what, as soon as a woman gets involved, her fist can go wherever the fuck it likes, including up her vag and then right up your nose. Let this be a lesson, ladies and gentlemen, and especially gentlemen. You may think you have free speech until you give women the vote. And then they'll stick their pussy up your nose, however the fuck that works. So,
there you go.
Yeah, don't give women the vote, or this shit will happen.
Just imagine, right? Just imagine today, if you're on Twitter, X, and you wanted to talk about, what can we do to protect public speakers from what happened to Charlie Kirk, from being assassinated in public for talking about ordinary things, because everything he talked about was pretty ordinary, right? And somebody was able to say, you can't say that, you can't talk about that because the alleged assassin was revealed to be a gay man dating a transition trans woman, and therefore it's transphobic for you to use the word assassination to describe the death of this man, and it's transphobic for you to be upset that he was assassinated. So imagine if you couldn't have that conversation because it might offend the assassin or the assassin's girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever the individual is identifying as. That would be about as rational and logical as saying that you can't discuss the idea that you should be told an ad is an ad and not be told that it is a legit news story, right? Because you're offending some chick that was accused of sleeping with journalists to get favorable coverage for her work. It doesn't even matter if she really did it or not. It's not related. None of that is related. And it doesn't make that subject off limits. It shouldn't make that subject off limits. but that's the equivalent that they want. So what they want, platforms need to develop interoperable reporting mechanisms. You should be able to report to a inter-platform government, basically, that governs Facebook and X and Reddit and YouTube, any other social media platform, right, should be able to report to that inter-platform government that somebody harassed you on platform A, and that individual should be affected on platforms B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way through the alphabet. Exchange channels may facilitate faster action. For example, when a prominent actor is identified to be linked to repeated harmful behavior, you get banned on X for bothering somebody on X. You are also banned on every other social media platform. Such efforts are important for understanding the scope and nature of online gender-based violence, but also to coordinate mitigation actions by platforms and other stakeholders, including governments, civil society, or even law enforcement. Get into the wrong argument on X, and the cops show up at your door. Why are you harassing Gladys? How dare you have conversations without including her? And how dare you mock her with pictures of her character on Bewitched every time she shows up in a conversation uninvited? What is wrong with you? You're under arrest. Then, this is an interesting bit, right? This was published 2 years ago. Already existing cross-platform efforts and crisis protocols, such as the Global Internet Forum to Counter Terrorism's Content Incident Protocol and the Christchurch Call Crisis Response Protocol. So these are two protocols that involve social media reporting to them, and then them assessing these reports and reporting back to social media what they should be doing. Should consider how online gender-based violence is relevant to their scope and mandates, and how to strengthen mechanisms appropriately. Which means they want these cross-platform efforts and crisis protocols to be able to tell various owners or founders of various social media, so maybe Gab, right, or Truth, or any of the other alternative platforms, Rumble. They want to be able to tell them what rules have to apply to their users. Relevant voluntary commitments or co-regulatory frameworks should also be reviewed, it says. I skipped something here. Recognizing misogyny as a radicalization vector for violent extremism. So that's actually kind of the meat of this right here. They want essentially to be able to label all anti-feminist speech and all speech that women take offense at, which there's a lot of overlap, but it's not all the same. They want to be able to take that and use it as speech that can be controlled, speech that has to be controlled, and an excuse to block you from speaking. So they don't even have to say, for instance, you can't talk about the fact that this ad that you read was presented as if it was a legit news story, and you think that the ad should be identified as an ad instead of presenting it as a legit news story. It doesn't have to even be associated with Quinn. Right? All they have to do is take the shortcut. It's misogynistic to talk about anything that has to do with the Gamergate protest because it traces back to information that was revealed by this woman's infidelity. And you can't talk about a woman's infidelity, and therefore everything connected to this woman's infidelity is off limits. Discussing it is misogynistic. If you talk about any of these subjects, you are engaging in online misogyny. Right? Now, let's translate that to discussion of, say, the Russia conspiracy theory that the Democrats put out to try to stop Trump from becoming president in the United States. Right? That Russian conspiracy theory traces back to Hillary Clinton's infidelity to the United States, where she took risks that people in her political position are not allowed to take, and then used allegations of misogyny to cover for that. Oh, you're only upset about this because I'm a woman. You just don't think women can handle positions of authority. Right? You put sensitive information on an insecure server, and then 30,000 pieces of it disappeared. We don't know which ones contained information that could harm the country because they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, you're only upset about that because I'm a woman. Right? So, under what they are trying to do here, any effort to debunk the Russian conspiracy theory, which turned out to be completely invented by the Hillary Clinton campaign, by the way, complete and utter fraud. Any discussion of that fraud would be silenced on social media. You couldn't argue about it. You couldn't talk about it. You couldn't share evidence. Even news outlets that reported on it, their stories, their news stories couldn't be shared on social media. Right? You couldn't inform people about it. Your vote could not be informed by that information because misogyny. Right? Picture that.
You just hate women. No, it's not the actions of one specific woman that we take issue with. No, it's just you hate all women, and period, point blank. That's it. That is all the argument that they needed to make.
Yep. So in the UK, they had a men's rights party. I think they still do. In the US, we don't have a men's rights party. I think in India, they do. We should, by the way, have a men's rights political party.
Mm-hmm.
And there should be candidates. And they should be men. Like a lot of people have, jokingly in chat and throughout history, named different ones of us at Honey Badger Radio for president. And of course, my name's been put out there. Fuck no. I am not qualified for that job. And I would not do that job if elected, right? And I don't think that the country is ready for a woman to do that job. And I sure as shit wouldn't take it as long as the media uses, you can't criticize this candidate because of her sex. Regardless of which media it is. I don't care if it's left, right, up, down, back, forth. It doesn't matter. Nobody should be using that argument in any election. You can't criticize what this person says or does because of her sex. That disqualifies all women from politics as long as it is a thing.
Well, in your case, you'd get murdered.
Yeah, I probably would.
It's something. It's an inevitability we've been encountered with. If you're too far out, if you've said some too many spicy things over the years, then they will just simply thrust those spicy things into the news cycle to bully you out of ever having any office. But if they can't find enough spicy things, they'll just murder you, as we've recently discovered. Like if you're middle of the road but effective, they'll kill you. If you're ahead of the road and effective, then they'll just shadow ban you. And that's what happened to all of us like 10 years ago. And that's why it's never going to happen for any of us, because we were ahead of the curve. And as we've discovered all too colorfully, if you will never be thanked for being ahead of the curve. The fact that we were talking about this years before anyone else was meant that we were already pushed out of the limelight a long ass time ago, and we'll never be able to hold any even potential point of office, and that's probably for the best, because that's not what we do. We're not here to dive into that shark's nest, and we'll never be able to, and that's why we stay here in our space leopard colony, trying to convince other people to look outside the box, and we've suffered the consequences for doing that for a long time, and we're going to keep doing it. Convincing people to get outside the box they live in, where actually the problem is this degradation of the relationship between men and women. Everyone else is looking at the immigration problem and the fucking race problem and all these other leaves of the poison ivy that have spawned from the initial problem, and it's going to be lifetimes before anyone beyond our little space leopard colony can realize that all of this has spawned from the degradation of the relationship between men and women. Because of the problems that have been spawned from that, the race problems, the trans problems, the immigration problems, everyone's looking towards those issues because they're so easily fixed. It's easy to fix the immigration problem. Just send them back. It's remarkably easy to send them back. We can't send the women back. Yeah, the women problem is so much deeper and so much more difficult because we can't just send the women back. We have to deprogram the women. And that's really difficult. And that's why we faced these difficulties over the last 10 years or so. Because we're addressing the seeds of the problem, not the leaves. I know that's the metaphor I keep using, but it's true. And that's, we're planting trees under which the shade of which we will never sit under, as the Greek proverb goes. And so, we'll never get in positions of power. We'll never have statues built of us. In fact, we're going to disappear into history, despite having inspired people to do what they're doing now. Even the Charlie Kirks of the world, the people actually facing death, they're here because of. Wait, this sounds really convoluted, but yeah, they're here because the likes of us were here 10 years ago. The people who appeared 5 years ago to address the leaves of the poison ivy are in far greater danger and have far much more to gain and far much more to lose than we did, having appeared 10 years ago addressing the seeds of the problem. And the seeds of the problem are the degradation of the relationship between men and women. It's going to take a long time for even the prominent voices of the so-called right to even begin to understand why they're even here in the first place, why we have these racial problems and these immigration problems and these trans problems. It's all because of, well, not even feminism. It's because of what came before feminism? Dare I say, romantic chivalry? It hasn't been around for the last century. It's been around for the last millennium.
Yeah.
It goes back far further back into history than most people can even comprehend. And so, you know, it might take another 1,000 years to really fix this. And, you know, so don't worry about it, folks. We're all going to be long dead before any of this is fixed. But carry on doing your shit with your bad self. You're not going to get statues. You're not going to get books written about you or Hollywood movies written about you. We're here to just chip away slowly at this problem.
And you
like
know,
we're not in it for the glory. We're in it for the we're in it for the long haul. We're in it. Yeah.
I mean, I would say this to anyone who feels like, you know, this is just a fool's errand, what we're doing here. You know, 10 years ago, maybe longer than that, but I would estimate about 10 years ago, nobody gave a shit. The feminists did not give a shit about us because they knew they could just ignore us and, oh, well, nobody's paying attention to these people. The fact that they are reacting so viscerally to what we are saying and the things that we're doing speaks volumes as far as I'm concerned. Because if they didn't understand that we were a direct threat to their narrative, they would just keep silent. But they're not. They are making their own little feminist manifestos, right? And no, they are directly attacking us as people, as human beings, just living on this earth and having an opinion. They can't kill all of us. They can't Charlie Kirk all of us. They probably wish that they could, but you know, for what it's worth right now, we are the thorn in their fucking side. And I would like everyone who is listening to this to come away with that type of energy. You know, there's times when I feel like, man, we've been at this for how long, you know, and it seems like such slow momentum. But when you see articles and you see things like the Department of Homeland Security directly labeling this group as a terrorist, is that what they call this, terrorist or a domestic threat?
Yeah, we have we've been put on a number of academic lists and one non-academic list. And then also we've been maligned by the SPLC.
Yeah, I would wear that as a badge of fucking pride.
Yeah.
You know, you can't cancel all of us. You can't throw us all in the fucking bin of history. It's not going to happen. You know, they assassinated Charlie Kirk. Well, what the hell do you think that's going to do? It's only going to spawn. There's 10 more Charlie Kirks that just spawned overnight. You know, I saw a video of children in high school kids standing up to their administration, basically standing for Charlie Kirk and against any kind of teacher in their classrooms, in their schools, who would, you know, mock his death. I'm telling you, it's unfortunate that it had to happen this way, but there's a real change happening here. And I think more people are going to wake up. I think it's harder to wake up from the feminist nightmare, you know. But what we're looking at is a generation of up and coming truth seekers. And as long as you have that kind of energy and we keep putting out this messages and pointing to the actual real facts, I think there can be nothing but a bigger swath of individuals saying, hey, you know what? That makes sense. It doesn't sound like hate. It sounds like actual truth. And I've seen this happen in my own lifetime. So yeah, no, maybe these people are telling the truth. Maybe we should stand against what these feminist academics are trying to shove down our throats, because we can visualize and actually see the lies that are being told to us, you know?
Yep.
So I'm full of hope. I'm full of hope.
I am too. It's easy to get blackpilled on this stuff, but
Yeah.
you have to realize, like, besides the fact that there's been a significant amount of change in the last 10 years, which most people don't realize this, but that's actually a large amount of progress.
Mhm.
Just going from the fact that people are not being so easily canceled for stupid jokes about dongles and dicks, right? To the fact that we are holding people accountable for advocating violence against individuals on the basis of just political speech, right?
Yeah.
That's a huge leap in a 10-year space, and we weren't the first people to talk about this stuff.
Mhm.
We were early at the beginning of the sweeping changes,
Yeah.
right? But we stand on the shoulders of giants,
Yes.
and this type of discussion goes back centuries. And in more recent history before us, existed like Paul Elam of A Voice for Men, who was in operation before us. In fact, uh, Allison and Karen and I getting together, Paul was instrumental in that. He wasn't the instrument of that, but he was instrumental in us starting to work together.
Mhm.
And A Voice for Men was the first host for Honey Badger Radio. So we have him to thank, and their crew to thank.
Mhm.
And before all of that, you had Dr. Warren Farrell, who wrote about these issues back when nobody was talking about them, and was canceled. He was part of the National Organization for Women, and he was approaching gender issues from a neutral standpoint. They didn't like that, and when he started talking about women are making progress, there are issues affecting men, and men need to make progress too, they canceled him. They didn't just cancel him, they lied about him.
Yeah.
They defamed him in some of the most egregious ways by deliberately misinterpreting things he said to mean the exact fucking polar opposite of what they actually meant,
Mhm.
in order to make him sound like some sort of incest supporting pedophile, which was a bullshit argument. They lied about him, right? And even before that, you had researchers like Murray Strauss, who lost their entire careers, who were completely canceled simply for pointing out the difference between accurate research and ideologically biased research in the field of research into intimate partner and sexual violence prevalence, where feminists were trying to make these things look more prevalent than they really were and more gendered than they really were. And he pushed back against that and got canceled, right? Got lied about. This goes all the way back to the beginning of the 20th century, when Ernest Belfort Bax was writing about feminist ideas and ideals, and what we would today call feminist jurisprudence in law and policy. Back then, there was no feminist jurisprudence. It was just gynocentrism. Things like the Badger game where a woman would flirt with a guy and then get him into a compromising position and then claim to be, get caught in this compromising position and claim to be reputationally injured by him and demand money. As a type of scam. And that was very prevalent at the time. He talked about all those kind of things. He talked about the demands of the suffragettes and everything. You can actually find the writings of Bax, Ernest Belfort Bax, documented on avoiceformen.com. So if you search for that, you can search for that name, Ernest Belfort Bax, and avoiceformen.com together, and it'll probably take you right to his writings. I do have hope, simply because there was not so much, it was a losing battle for a century. And now we are seeing some change. And that's like, for a century, there was no change. So that's progress. Even if it's not the rapid progress we would like to see. I don't want to play the long game, right? I want everything better now.
Yeah.
I'll do this for as long as it needs done, or at least as long as I'm around. But I don't want it to need done that long, because as long as it needs done, men are suffering and men are facing discrimination when they shouldn't be suffering and they shouldn't be facing discrimination. And women are self-sabotaging the entire time. And that's wrong too.
Yeah.
But I'm going to finish this up with the end of this paragraph, and we'll get into the next bit next time. But what does this boil down to? What do they want to do here? And this is what they're talking about right here. Co-regulatory frameworks, right? The EU's 2022 Strengthened Code of Practice on Discrimination, which keeps, or on this disinformation, not discrimination, but it keeps people from debating the truth of matters like what is really going on with this virus that's circling the world now. What is really going on with the various medical treatments that are being imposed on people, people are being told you can't have a job if you don't do this. What is really going on with practices of keeping people at home, shutting down whole cities and so on. And you couldn't talk about that because you might be accused of spreading disinformation. Rather than having, if you say something that's not true, other people can present evidence that you were wrong, and that ends that tangent of that discussion. Oh, here's the evidence that debunks what you just said, right? No, instead, the government comes in, and maybe you get arrested for saying the thing that you said, right? Rather than people being able to debate the validity of what you said. And this includes a commitment, as it says here, to operate channels of exchange between their relevant teams. So between, again, all these various social media, if you say something on Facebook that X doesn't like, or if you say something on X that Reddit doesn't like, Reddit takes issue with fucking everything. Suddenly you're in trouble again. Maybe you get banned from all social media. Maybe that comment gets taken down. Maybe they do what YouTube likes to do, and just it's suddenly that video is private. That comment is nobody's allowed to respond to it. Or maybe they do what Reddit likes to do, and you can post all you want, but nobody can see anything you've posted. Right? And you have no idea. They don't tell you. So exchange between their relevant teams. Share information about cross-platform influence operations. They don't want you persuading anyone else to agree that maybe men are human, and maybe all these gynocentric laws and policies are being used as a chisel to chip away at civil rights by throwing men under the bus. Maybe you can't talk about that. What's the goal? Preventing dissemination and resurgence. They want to prevent you from having conversations about political issues using logic, reason, and facts, because you might not come to the conclusions that they want you to agree with. Committed channels could extend to incidents of gendered or sexualized harassment campaigns. Again, like the so-called harassment campaign against Hillary Clinton for her infidelity to the United States. Right? You can't debunk the Russian conspiracy theory because that's misogynistic. It's about Hillary. You can't inform your vote on the fact that the Democrat Party bald-faced lied to you because that's misogynistic. It traces back to Hillary. Why do they want to do that? Such an effort could be seen as beneficial to compliance with the EU's DSA, under which platforms are required to assess and mitigate systemic risk related to online gender-based violence. What are they really trying to get rid of? Systemic risk that the political establishment cannot control how the electorate votes.
Mm-hmm.
I want to picture what the world would be like if Kamala Harris was president right now.
Oh, God. I don't need nightmares, please.
We'd be in thermonuclear war with Russia, and if anyone protested against it, they'd be called not only misogynistic, but racist. And that would be our future forever, because there'd be millions of illegal immigrants in the country who would forever be voting for Kamala Harris and descendants. God knows who that would even be. But yeah, I don't think Trump is a saint by any means. I don't even think he's flawless in any way. But for God's sake, folks, just for a moment, look through a pinhole camera at what the world would be like if Kamala Harris was president, or if Hillary Clinton had been president from 2016 through to 2024. I mean, at this point, Kamala Harris would be president. The world you would have right now would be the world we have in the UK right now, where there's just no escape from the communist revolution. So, yeah, fucking take the piss out of Trump all you like, but the alternative would have been infinitely worse. And I mean infinitely, because it would go on forever. It would be the Big Brother future. The Big Brother future that Europe is experiencing right now. Please let me in. Please let me in. Please don't let me leave this continent. I don't want to go home. I don't want to ever go home. Please let me stay. Not in Canada. Fucking Canada sucks just as much.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, I wonder how long it'll be before being threatened with arrest for saying the wrong thing on social media will be a reason why Europeans can ask for asylum in the United States, because I think that's coming. And as far as Hillary is concerned, people always say I get overboard on Hillary Clinton, but you have to understand, I watched the way that she behaved during her husband's presidency. And I watched the news that came out about them, the personal news that came out about what she was like behind the scenes and everything. And I firmly believe, beyond even the slightest shadow of a doubt, that if she got into office, she would be the last president of the United States.
Mm.
I will not elaborate on that. You guys can figure that out for yourselves. But that is the truth. That is what I think of Hillary Clinton. And I don't think anybody was scarier that ran for office during my lifetime. Even the guy that wanted to get rid of all the nukes. God, that was like, I was in high school, junior high or high school. Mondale wanted to disarm. Ran against Reagan or Bush. And he was scary, but he wasn't as scary as Hillary Clinton. So, and that's not about misogyny. That's about the kind of person she is.
Yeah.
If she was a man, she would be just as scary. Minus the fact that, at least as a man, we could criticize her without having people say, you only say that because she's a woman. Like, that's the only difference. All of her ideas would be just as scary. But as a candidate, she's scarier as a woman because she can use allegations of misogyny to try to shut down criticism. And yeah, Mondale was made a joke. They wouldn't have been able to do that if he was female. Right? Dukakis was eliminated because of sexual misconduct. They wouldn't have been able to do that if he was a female. Right? Various other candidates that the establishment didn't like were eliminated. I was not a Mondale fan personally. I thought that was a scary idea of being the first to disarm. I think that that's not a good way to achieve peace. I agree with both Kennedy and Reagan on the idea that being able to eliminate your opponent puts you in a position to argue for peace that being unable to defend yourself doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
But in any case, that's essentially my take on the candidates throughout the last, I guess, 30 years, really. I'm 53, been eligible to vote since 1992. And like, even prior to that, I guess 40 years. I've been alert and aware of politics for the last 40 years. Ever since I started paying attention during the Reagan administration. And yeah, out of everybody, the scariest was Hillary Clinton. Even Kamala Harris was not as scary as Hillary Clinton. Harris was a puppet. I don't think
Yeah.
Clinton was.
Yeah, no, Kamala was toothless.
Yeah.
Hillary just had this cult-like, if I can use that word, backing that I just never understood. I think it was like, all the women who were looking for some sort of revenge. And it always bothered me that, these people who are, all right, feminists, supported her even after Bill Clinton got caught with Monica Lewinsky, right? And she stayed with him. You would think that feminists would be like, oh, what are you doing? You got to leave that one. Man, he ain't no good. Nope. They stood right by her side,
Yep.
even after she stayed. And it's like, wait a minute, how does that align with any of your mantra, right? Like, you're independent, you could be an independent single woman, and you can do it all, and blah, blah. You don't need no man, but she stayed with him. And we all know why. You don't leave a fucking former or sitting president as their wife, because that gives you have access to that power, and that's what she used throughout after he was out of office. That's what she used to gain the position that she had, moving forward. And I'm glad that people saw through that and saw her for what she was. When she laughed at Gaddafi's death, she danced on his grave. And some people who were aware and awake and actually paying attention saw that and saw her for the demonish ghoul that she is. But for the Democratic Party was still had such a stronghold, and well, the rest is history, right? And
Yeah.
so is she and her presidential hopes.
Well,
Bye.
if all you're interested in is growing your own personal wealth, then a president who went from, what was it, 15 million to 250 million in
you kind of wonder.
in his tenure as president, you're like, oh yeah, you can go off to Epstein's Island and fuck 1 million underage girls. I don't give a fuck because I want 250 million every 8 years.
Yeah.
They're probably billionaires by now. What we're being disclosed as their public wealth is probably a fraction of what's going on.
Yeah.
They are there to line their own pockets, as has every president except Trump in almost the entire history of American politics, and indeed politics in every country. This is the problem with democracy.
Trump lost many different presidency both times.
Yeah, it's
He's
one of
donating
the only presidents to have lost money in his time in office.
Yeah, I mean, has there been another president that renounced his salary?
There's only been 4. George Washington was one. There were 2 others, and then there was Trump.
Yeah.
This is why it's important to let rich people run for office. People who can't be bought.
Yeah.
For everything these fucking socialists say about the billionaires are the problem. We should let the billionaires be in charge. People who don't stand to gain any wealth from having $100,000 a year wage because they don't give a shit about it. We want people in office who don't give a shit about the wages they can get, or even the blood money they can get because they're already rich. Trump was already a billionaire when he entered office. He didn't need any more money. And this is why we need kings. Because kings are already so rich that they cannot be bought. And this is why monarchism is better than democracy. And I know this is going to rub a lot of Americans the wrong way, so I'll stop talking.
It's kind of like saying shit with corn in it is better than shit with rice in it.
Yeah.
It's still government.
Yeah.
It's still a form of government. Right? There's you're talking to an anarcho-capitalist here. I don't want anybody in charge. Right? That's the other reason why if somebody tried to thrust me into that particular job, I would turn it down. I don't believe it should exist.
Yeah.
So if I was put in that position and couldn't get out of it, then I would just set about dismantling the system entirely. Like people are upset that Trump is making changes to the system that, in my opinion, are minor.
Yeah.
So,
meanwhile, these are all the same people that say that they hate government, right? Well, he's doing things to reduce the power and the money that is being spent, and it's just such a mind fuck for them that they can't, because it's Trump. Yep. Right? They hate him. So anything, if he cured cancer,
yep,
they would have a problem with that too.
Oh my God! Look how many oncologists he's putting out of work.
Right.
News for you: oncologists would love to be out of that job and into some other area of medicine.
Yeah.
They have to prepare themselves on a regular basis to tell people that they're going to die and nothing that the doctor is going to do can save them.
Yeah.
But to finish this up, I will say this. Again, as we've been told a million times, we've been told that UN Women is toothless. They don't do anything. They're just they're not an actual UN organization. They're not actually influential. They don't get anything done. They don't affect anything, and they're not part of anything. Well, what they are talking about here is stuff that has been implemented. Right? Therefore, you have to consider that they have influence and that they are informing changes in government law and policy and also in corporate policy. And in some ways, corporate policy is even more dangerous because you can't use the Bill of Rights against a corporation. You can use the Bill of Rights against the government. The Bill of Rights tells things the government cannot do. Things that the government cannot take away, basically, from the citizens in the United States. So you could sue if the federal government passed a law that said you can't discuss this political issue because it traces back to something that we can use to accuse you of misogyny. But you can't necessarily sue if Facebook does that.
Mm-hmm.
Facebook isn't governed by the Bill of Rights. Now, if you can prove that the government paid Facebook to do that, then you have a case.
Yeah.
But that involves actually having access to that information. Right? So this is some heavy stuff. This is essentially an organization that is masquerading as a toothless ladies club for political discussion among ladies around the world, ambassadors, right? That has actually got its teeth into every government around the world and many corporations, including the ones that govern what you can and can't say online. Very dangerous.
Yeah.
Next week, we'll probably gloss over some of this. We'll essentially, I might not directly read the entire paragraph of each of these things, but I will highlight a bit here and a bit there. Because this is about the use of AI systems to censor your online speech. Right? And then the next thing that we are going to look at, based on this, is this Act to End Violence Against Women and Girls program, which we do have already up to look at. It'll probably reload a bunch of times. It's not super long like this other thing is. I'm not skipping a bunch of it in order to show you what it looks like. So we'll be able to go over it possibly more quickly. And then we will get into what UN Women says about how to counter the manosphere. So that's our trajectory here. That is, unless something else comes up that we absolutely have to talk about instead. If nothing else comes up that we absolutely have to talk about instead, this is the direction we're going for the next couple weeks. So with that, I will thank my two co-hosts for sticking out. This is kind of a longer sausage. I'm about half an hour over the amount of time I usually do on Thursday nights. But we didn't have a show last week, so this kind of makes up for it. Thanks to the audience for listening. I know this is really dry stuff, but when it boils down to it, what you are being told here is there is a world government effort to use the concept of misogyny to silence your criticism of any law, policy, or other government initiative that affects you negatively. Right? And then thanks very much to Brian for working hard to make things happen in the background so that I can do this. and have the vertical chat as well, the vertical broadcast as well, and for going overtime with me. Good night, all.
Good night, y'all.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.